also welcome you to this data management event. Today, I'm deeply honored to have been chosen to give a talk on the life and work of a very dear friend, George Samaras. Of course, this half hour or so could not even scratch the surface of the life of a person who lived such a full life with so much zest like George. He was indeed larger than life. So I will focus on some snippets of his life that I am personally aware or involved, and then follow with a snippet of his latest academic work. So the talk will be divided in two parts. Firstly, I will give some snippets from the life of George Samaras, and then I will follow with some snippets from the academic work of George Samaras focused on his latest work. As those who know him would be able to say, George was an all-rounder who lived his life to the fullest and enjoyed taking part and excelling. We all remember George as a people's person, networking and socializing in every minute of his life. But he was much more. He was a family man, both with his immediate family, the Mira and the children, but also his extended family. He was an athletic person from the age where he could run. He started running, doing hurdles, high jump in high school, and lately team sports, basketball as a teenager, and lately his biggest love in sports terms, tennis. Music, including singing and dancing, was an aspect that I didn't know until we got a bit closer. But also the department could hear him almost every time he came in to sing a small tune. And of course, we cannot ignore his gourmet eating. He loved food. And to cap it all up, he was also able to achieve academic excellence. George Samaras, above all, was a family man. Mira, his wife, whom he often confided his love and adoration, and of course his children, Mihaela, or Mimi, as he would affectionately call her with pride. Modestos, so proud with his wit and achievements, and last but not least, Anastasia, Sparky, with whom he was besotted. As his brother pointed out a few days ago in his speech during the tennis tournament in his honor, some decades ago, George started life in Famagusta, carefree and mischievous, running around in the fields, swimming in the crystal clear waters of the Famagusta Bay. They would climb the orange trees of the surrounding fields, fish in the Famagusta Bay, and hunt in the mountains of Pentadactylos. 1974. Suddenly, after the invasion by the Turkish occupation army, George and his family became refugees, leaving their beloved Famagusta, taking with them only the clothes they wore. Not even some photos of their childhood to remember the carefree times they had. This is all the pictures his family could provide me. The top two before the invasion and a few more after the invasion. After that, he went to the army, serving as a lieutenant, then studies in Greece at the National and Cappadostrian University of Athens, where he obtained his first degree in mathematics in a record time of 3.5 years. And after that, the United States for his master's and doctorate studies. And finally, 1993, he returns to Cyprus, where he joined a very young university in his infant years of operation, trusted to set up an internationally acclaimed university, and that they achieved. Whilst building the computer science department, He also managed to build an international acclaimed academic career, snippets of which I will outline later. But first, I will briefly show some aspect of his multifaceted life. George Samaras, the sportsman. Tennis, as of late, was his sporting passion, where he won numerous awards, playing singles or doubles and watching almost every major event. Lately, last 2 weeks ago, we had the first Open in his honor, and of course his family was there, with Modestos following his father's footsteps. A proud George Samaras. George Samaras, the adventurer, I cannot ignore this part of his life. He loved South Africa. He loved visiting the Kruger Park, where no lion, no matter how close, would face him. Well, maybe not so close in the end. I'm sorry, there is a gap in hitting the key and heading the next picture. We had to go through many roadblocks and obstacles, but George enjoyed every moment of it, and finally, what can I say? George, please. Well, that's what I wanted to say. Finally, exhaustion sets in. So he lived every moment of everything, as we know. But let's turn to another part of George, the charismatic charmer. George was always fun to be with. His witty humor, his teasing charm, his charisma with people, he would almost always get his own way with a smile. And that's us smiling, of course. With his emotional intelligence and with equal ease, he could strike a conversation with the Prime Minister or a waiter, always able to make people feel special. George was indeed larger than life, and he's greatly missed by his family, friends, colleagues, and generally anybody that came across him, even from across the seas, who only met him a few times in their life. George, the friend, the person, the mentor, loved people and was greatly loved by people, a true people's person. Speaking with his research group, one thing that comes across is that he was a true mentor. Or as one of his PhD graduates put it, he was like a father to me. Since attending undergraduate studies at the computer science department till my postdoc and beyond, he was always there, ready to stand by me, advise me. And for those that knew him, I will mention one of his favorite openings. Τι κάνει ο καλύτερος μου φίλος. For those that can't speak Greek, of course, it's translated, how is my best friend? Which will remain within us, a constant reminder of his warmth and that we were all his best friends. Because he did have a circle of friends with different thematic areas, and all of them were his best friends. And I think you can also attest to that, those that met George. In a nutshell, George loved life and lived life to its fullest. Next, I will outline some of his academic work. Even though his research is not in my research field, I equally got excited about his work, which he so eloquently presented. I will start with the group, the lab, DMAC, which he built. He had extensive collaboration, both with research associates, most of them his postdocs who chose to remain with him, some of them 20 years or so, and affiliated faculty and some collaborators from the department. He had a very rich academic focus. We can see a number of the areas that he was working in parallel, and he was quite capable to maintain quite a number of research groups and being very successful with quite a number of European and other bodies funded projects. Of course, it was inevitable that he would receive several awards, and I will only focus on the academic aspect that I know and perhaps is not very well known. He was an appointed visiting professor at the Wits University in South Africa, a university that's among the top 200 universities in the world. He gave several lectures there and was very well received, either at Wits or even at the University of Johannesburg. He was also the guest of honor at the PhD graduation ceremony at the University of Johannesburg, seated next to the rectorate. Who can pick George here? So George left his legacy, as far as I know it, also in South Africa. Professor Berit Aronson from the Wits University, who was collaborating with him in a number of final year projects, devoted a memoriam for him in one of the open day final year project days. Next, I want to present some aspects of his recent scientific work, which I know he greatly enjoyed. We often talked about it. I will adopt his own slides and try to do as much justice as I can. In a few occasions I've listened to it, as I said, minus of course the animated and spirited presentation that he always gave. So the topic that I will focus on is utilizing human, cognitive, and emotional factors for user-centered computing. Of course, I didn't expect anything else but George to be naturally attracted to an area where it involves people. He understood people, he naturally interacted with people, so it was inevitable, I think, that George would have moved to this particular area. And in his particular keynote that he gave in Japan, I think last year, he always started by thanking his people, his group, the DIMA group. A number of them are sitting at the, in this lecture theater. And he always started with human factors in aviation as an example, with their over 50 years of experience to motivate the field and the research opportunities that are still open. And finally, he would nicely lead you to their own research. He motivated the adoption of a new three-dimensional model using and taking into account human factors. Human factors, as he would call this, is the study of the human's capability, limitations and behaviors, and the integration of that knowledge into the systems we design for them, with the goals of enhancing safety, performance, and the general well-being of the operators of the system. So the term human factors has grown increasingly popular as the commercial aviation industry has realized that it quite often is the main factor in aviation accidents and incidents, to a tune of about 80%. So this particular example shows how easy it is for a novice or not so novice pilot to make a mistake where the pilot inadvertently pulled the fuel shuttle valve instead of the cabin heat control, with the result evidently shown there. Of course, human factors for the design of cockpits are not new. They've been around and studied since the World War II, and we can see there are various designs leading to some of the modern designs. In fact, this view graph shows the complexity and the factors affecting the cockpit design, and one can go through numerous factors which have been studied extensively in order to come up with these particular cockpit designs. But George was not satisfied with that. He wanted to dig into it a bit further. In aviation, we still have one size fits all. And the interface between the human, the environment, and the machine would lead to accidents, especially so since we don't have a more dynamic design which is adapted for every different person, as he would show later in his model. So his premise was, in our times, we can do better. So we want to model and bring the human in the center of any activity by providing a general model of human factors. So starting from the right-hand side, the accident gray zone there, he would extend his own understanding and research to focus on the crossroad, that fuzzy space, which is the space where most accidents, most errors do occur. So he motivated that we do need a much more refined model, and the one size fits all is not prevalent for today's technology. So let's turn to human factors in nowadays computer systems. Basically, one size fits all versus personalization. We can say that the ineffective practice of usability in today's interactive systems does not naturally embed the user's characteristics in the design process. So it ignores factors that users are different characteristics, different structural and functional mental models, and each individual user needs individual scaffolding. Therefore, it is necessary to understand in depth the interdependence among the user characteristics and the tasks taking place during user interactions. So personalization systems offer an alternative by adapting content and functionality according to the user's unique characteristics in order to improve efficiency, effectiveness, and user experience. So taking that, George would go on to develop his particular model. So personalization strategies, of course, have been around with us for a long time. Amazon is quite a good example, where every time you log in, they will come back to you with some of the things that you've been looking at close to your interests. And the problem is there, one size fits all is what we should change. Main factors being modeled for personalization up to now was information about the users, information about the interaction device, and information about the context. The question is whether all of these factors are sufficient today for personalizing interactive systems. So personalization based on human factors is what George was all about. Human-computer interactions are processed on a cognitive and emotional level. So it's studied by quite a number of different disciplines that users respond to various stimuli through the use of logical and rational thinking in cognitive processing that has also a certain degree of emotional influence. Users respond to various stimuli through the use of logical and rational thinking. We said that, sorry. Personalize the visual and interaction design to the individual's preferred cognitive processing characteristics and emotional states. So, therefore, it is imperative to personalize the visual, the human cognitive and emotional characteristics, and investigate and integrate in the user design process of interactive systems. What are the challenges though? Quite a number of human factors as we discussed up to now, but how do we go about eliciting and modeling these different factors? What are the effects of human factors on the design characteristics? What visible aspects could be adopted for improving the usability and user experience? How to design, develop, and integrate all these entities under an extensive interoperable system. So George proposed individual difference in cognitive styles and cognitive processing abilities, and a person's preferred way of processing information using cognitive-based mechanism instructions should be studied further. It should reflect how individuals process, organize, and structure information. It should be related to mental behaviors habitually applied by an individual to problem solving. So going back to 1991, there is a study which shows that there are 30 different cognitive styles. This, according to this paper, the descriptions, correlations, methods of assessment, and effect on behavior may be grouped into two groups: verbal imager on one side and the holist analyst on the other side. So this describes individuals' mode of information representation and processing. On the left-hand side, the verbals, which basically represent information using verbal associations, and on the right-hand side, the images, which represent information in mental pictures. And this also reflects how individuals organize and structure information. The holists, in general, retain a global or overall view of the information, whereas the analyst views situation as a collection of parts and deconstruct that information into its component parts and stress only one or two aspects at a time. Of course, there is also the individual difference in cognitive processing abilities. So one can explain the functioning of the human mind in terms of more basic processes like the speed of processing, the control of processing, and also the working memory aspects. And human emotions, which are the states of feeling that affect human behavior, can also influence the rational. Preconditions that are related to previous emotional experience facilitate the efficient processing of knowledge and reasoning. So research has shown that human cognitive factors indeed affect the way individuals control their emotions, and humans with high working memory capacity control their emotions more naturally, and the emotional regulation indicates how individuals manage and experience unpleasant emotions. So how individuals process and control their emotions can be explained in this view graph, where on the left again we have emotional arousal, which is the capacity of the human being to sense and experience specific emotional situations, and the regulation of it on the right hand side, which is the way individuals perceive and control their emotions. So by combining these different levels of anxiety with the moderating role of emotional regulation, it is possible to examine how affectional responses hamper or promote human-computer interactions. Accordingly, by personalizing interactive systems, we can avoid stressful instances and thus take full advantage of users' cognitive capacity at any time. So one can recap the human factors. There are various definitions based on the extensive research that his group has carried out. The user perceptual preference characteristics can be described in a three-dimensional model. And this dimensional model discusses the cognitive aspects and the way they interact with emotional processing and the cognitive processing speed efficiency, And in the center, we have indeed the synthesis of these three into the human cognitive and emotional factors. So the premise is that taking into account this particular three-dimensional model, we can indeed build better human-computer interaction systems. So they went beyond that model, his group. They investigated the validity of the model in different real-life domains. So starting with some application domain, they studied the interaction between technology factors, design factors, bringing into it the human factors as well, considering their model as the core of the human factors design aspect. So they examined the validity of this model in different application domains, e-learning and m-learning, e-commerce, human interaction proofs, the well-known Captcha. That's, well, it bothers me every time I try to log in. I don't remember my passwords, and that's it. This Captcha comes in afterwards to make it worse, and I give up many times. User authentication, of course. So for each application domain, they identified the unique design aspects in which human factors can play an important role. They went along with a two-phase methodology. They conducted a series of user studies over the last 10 years, and they included 1,500 users. So that's a reasonable number to be able to derive some useful conclusions. So the two-phase methodology consisted of two phases. First phase is to investigate the effects of human factors on usability and user experience of interactive systems of different application domains. And phase B, based on the outcome, they proposed design guidelines and adaptation rules for each application domain. As we said before, the four were analyzed in detail. So I'll only show you very briefly one of the applications. I chose the Captcha case, which perhaps we all know. So on the left-hand side, we have the human cognitive processing factors. Again, we have the high-level cognitive processes at the top, and the elementary cognitive processes at the bottom here. And the whole idea is to see how the human cognitive processing factors affect the user security mechanism, the user authentication and Captcha. So based on the human cognitive processing factors, dynamically they want to influence the user security type, text-based, password, recognition-based, graphical, or whatever else may be, and also the user security complexity. Different number of characters or images depending on the cognitive aspects, and the type of characters and images. So the main effect causes a secondary effect which dictates the dynamic change of the Captcha interface according to the user. So what are the main Captcha challenges? First of all, the three categories are shown there. Text recognition, which is the most popular. Image recognition, whereby some images are shown and you have to select some combination of them perhaps, or some aspects of the images, and also the speech recognition Captcha. So based on their analysis, they adapted this for verbal holists with low cognitive processing abilities, verbal holists with limited cognitive processing abilities, to have text as the best option, and to have standard complexity. Standard complexity in the Captcha word means 5 to 7 characters with 40% text distortion, noise, and lines. So if a user is classified by some means to be of this type, this is the image he will see in his Captcha. As opposed to the verbal holists, where they have high cognitive processing abilities, the Captcha again will be text-based, but now a higher complexity image will be displayed with 8 to 10 characters with 60% text distortion, noise, and lines, as we can see here. Of course, if the user is an image analyst with low cognitive processing abilities, then an image will be selected and the complexity will be standard, as for example shown here with 12 colored images. So if now the user has high cognitive abilities, the complexity of the images will be increased, here by removing color and only displaying grayscale images. So the model was adapted in the triangle that I shown before, the interface between technology, design factors, human factors, taking into account a particular model to design this particular system. And the way users interact with stimuli, which means comprehend, understand, and give meaning to the information, spans into two functional levels with high and elementary. And from this we can personalize the task. They can decide on the, based on the high level cognitive factors, the type of textual or image display they would provide. They would take into account the holist and analyst abilities, and that would dynamically readapt the human interface in this system, the Captcha interface. Of course, there are many limitations and conclusion to this. How to model the interdependence among the three dimensions of the model is one aspect they have identified very early. And this is the model again, and this interplay has been a constant factor of analysis, including time, and of course the interaction effects between the different factors, the emotions, the cognitive styles, and more importantly perhaps is how to elicit human factors. So not much work has been done in that area. They have promoted that we need a holistic approach integrating design rules and other user factors. And how to develop now ecologically valid high-level system architectures based on documentation perhaps is another area they would have liked to indulge on. Is fudget enough to start with and then calibrate based on users' interactions? First fudget, then do it. Well, that's another aspect they wanted to investigate, and finishing the human factors in a dynamic environment have to be modeled, and a good model would effectively provide us with a better system. And this is my part of the on the research side of George, the aspect that he was doing lately. I would leave it at that. Anybody that's interested, his group is sitting up in this room. Please interact with them. I would like to finish off with this slide. George, you're deeply missed by all of us, but with your persona, you made sure that you will stay in our hearts and memory forever.